Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. This is Tony Robbins calling and speaking to you guys from London. Welcome to the Gold Mine. This is a session on finding new customers with the newest in social media. And we're going to have our guest here, Scott Klososky, with me in a moment. We're very excited to have you. Listen, I just want you to know the purpose of this session is to really help you to get the two things that are most important in having a competitive advantage, a significant competitive advantage in any business. You know, years ago, Peter Drucker said something I thought was so focused. He said, if you look at every aspect of a business and you really want to understand where the core of a business is, he said, all business is nothing but two things, innovation and marketing. And the simple description of innovation, when we hear it overused all the time, it sounds so complex. We think of it very often as just technology. Innovation just means finding a better way to serve the customers. If you can find a better way, if you can find a way to add more value to other customers' lives or your clients' lives than anybody else does, then you dominate, then you win, then you succeed, then you build real wealth. On the other hand, though, if you have some great innovation, but you don't have the capacity to market it, or you market it but not as effectively as your competitor, we all know situations throughout our business careers where maybe you experienced having what you consider to be the better product or the better service, but somebody else beat you. And if they beat you, they more than likely beat you with marketing. The best product, the best service, unfortunately doesn't win. It's the best marketed product or service. And if you have the best product and the best marketing, a la an Apple, you can dominate for, literally years or decades or more. So our session today is really all about that. And I've spent the last, 35 years of my life being obsessed for looking for things that are breakthroughs, those things that help you to take what seem to be impossible and make it possible. Strategies, insights, distinctions, shifts in human being psychologies. I was just, the last 3 or 4 weeks, to give you an idea, I've been all over the country, from everywhere from India back to the United States. I just finished a business mastery program in China where we had 1,500 people from all over China that flew in. But our goal here is to add as much value as possible. So what is it that people do that create that kind of innovation? One of the things that I've looked at through time is say, who are the leaders that are making that happen? And I've been very fortunate to be able to be with kind of at the ringside seat as some of the most incredible entrepreneurs in the world. Guys like Steve Wynn, or a few weeks ago I was speaking at Dreamforce. If you're familiar with it, Salesforce.com is a company that's grown from zero now to $3 billion in sales in a little more than 12 years. Mark Benioff, who's the founder and the creator of that company, started the program out of one of my seminars. He literally left Oracle and started the company up. And I've just helped watch along the way as I've also had a chance to assist. 3 years ago they were doing $1 billion, $2 billion last year, $3 billion this year. They're on target for $4 billion that they'll do in 2013. So if you look at people like him or Richard Branson, these are people that are always finding that edge. And one of the edges that they've all utilized to kind of a leapfrog over other people is technology. Certainly Salesforce has done that. And so I was looking at what are the tools that could give you a radical competitive advantage? Who could really introduce that to you? And over the last few years, I looked for people that really had an insight into what you could do to stay ahead of the curve, ahead of your competition, and know in the current world how to meet customers or clients where they live, how they think. We all know there's been a paradigm shift that's extraordinary. The guy that I came across that's become a good friend and a colleague now is named Scott Klososky. And Scott is going to be the person going to be taking you through this seminar experience today on this webinar. He's pretty amazing. He's co-founded one of the first Soviet-American joint ventures that designed one of the world's first handwriting text recognition software platforms. He's kind of a serial entrepreneur. He built one of the earliest webcasting companies that delivered one of the first pay-per-view events in the world, and he sold the company for $115 million. He produced the first book that was crowdsourced from start to finish, meaning an entire group of people organized where he was directing it, but they were bringing their content, and he produced this book. He's the author of 3 books, and his entire focus is how do you leverage technology in the current world to truly maximize what your business capabilities are. And this is the guy that I personally go to in our businesses. I just recently brought him into 2 of my companies and had him do audits there to once again show me what I could do to take things to the next level. So Scott is somebody I personally respect immensely, and I'm going to hand the ball to Scott, and he's going to take you on this ride. At the end, if you'd like to know more, be able to attend an event, Scott and our Scott from Robbins Research will give you a little more information about how you can apply to do that if you have an interest. But our goal here is to add as much value as possible. So I'm going to pass it on here to Scott. Scott, are you on the line?
I sure am.
Welcome, my friend.
Hey. It's always good to hear your voice, and always good to be able to help a lot of these folks today.
Thank you. Well, I want you to just launch in. Let's talk to people about how the world has changed and what What are the things that they really have to understand in the social environment to be able to take advantage of the opportunities for those that are first movers?
All right, we'll do it. So, a lot of people will ask me, like, Scott, what do you do? When you get that question, you always have to try to answer it. It's always hard when you do what I do. And so the simplest way I'll explain to people is I'll say I'm kind of like an arms dealer. If business is like a battle or like a war, I am very good at the weapons. And today, technology is, one of the most powerful set of tools or powerful set of weapons that we can possibly have. Now, I'm also going to tell you that although incredibly powerful, I am getting increasingly frustrated with the fact that a lot of leaders, a lot of business owners, a lot of the people who should be using these tools the most are also the people that seem to leave them in the toolbox or don't seem to want to pick them up. And so it's frustrating to me because, I think we live in a really blessed time, a time when to build a business, to be able to go out and find new customers, to be able to develop new products, we have more capabilities now. We have more tools to be able to do that than we've ever had, and there are new tools and concepts coming literally almost every day. Now, in that environment where we have all of these new things we could be using, we have a lot of people that are learning incredibly slowly, which is a shame. And so, today what we really hope to do is try to expose you to some of the ideas and concepts that could be most meaningful for you as far as how are you going to generate revenue going forward for the next few years, and then also how do you build better relationships with the customers that you already have. Because, as Tony always says, one of the best forms of revenue is the revenue you already have, right? So the easiest revenue to keep in the future is what you've already got, as opposed to even going out and getting new revenue. So that's what we're going to do a lot today is talk about, how is the sales model changing, right, and where are we going to get that revenue going forward in the future. Just about every organization should be interested in how are we going to prosper going forward. Now, I'm going to use a lot of vocabulary. I'm going to define the vocabulary for you as we go along today. So one of the first things I want to mention is digital marketing. Okay, so I'll define for you here in a little bit what digital marketing is, and I'll give you some background. But I want to start out by making this comment. Right, digital marketing is proving right now to be a very powerful force in being able to drive more revenue. And there are those that get it and those who don't. Now, I am perfectly happy with all kinds of traditional forms of marketing and advertising. In other words, I don't think we live in a world where the only thing that you do is digital marketing. But I'll tell you what, we definitely live in a world where if you don't understand how to do digital marketing, then you are giving away a bunch of market share that you just shouldn't be giving away. But it's a complicated field. I mean, you have to listen carefully. There's a lot to learn. Even in an hour and a half today, we're really only going to be able to scratch the surface on trying to get you exposed to some of these ideas. It takes a lot longer to try to get you to be able to learn these things. And so, but we want to, at least in an hour and a half, provide as much value as we possibly can to try to give you a leg up. But this is only going to matter if you're willing to learn these things. And so, yesterday I was doing a presentation, and a couple people had asked questions, and they said, Scott, we are like overwhelmed. Like you're overwhelming us, our brain's starting to fry. And so, can't we make this really simple? Isn't there just one thing that we can go do? And, I'd love to have given them that kind of answer, but I really said, look, I know it's overwhelming. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox. You got to learn them. There is no easy way around this. Okay, there's no one magic answer. In other words, you can't just say, I'm going to get on Facebook. Yeah, if I just have a Facebook presence, I can check off the box for digital marketing. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of tools. Facebook is just one of the small tools that's out there. I mean, I like it, but it's a small tool compared to all the other tools that are out there. So anyway, digital marketing is very powerful, but only if you're willing to invest, only if you're willing to really pay attention and learn. All right? So let's dive in and start, trying to learn some different things. Before we do that, I just want to mention that I know you have an ability to ask questions. I'm going to stop and answer the questions as we go along. So there's not going to be Q&A at the end. I'm just going to periodically kind of in between concepts stop and just answer some of your questions. May not be able to answer all of them today, but I'll try to pick out some of them that I think would really be helpful and answer them. So don't feel like you have to wait till the end. Just go ahead and toss questions in anytime you have them, and we'll deal with them as we go along. All right, let's get started. I want to start off by exposing some concepts to you. So let's go through some concepts and do some background. First thing is, we live in a world where we've been through Web 1.0, which is kind of e-commerce and connected organizations, and now we're in Web 2.0, which is connected people. And we will soon be fading into Web 3.0, by the way, which is connected devices. All right? So we want to stay today on just kind of Web 2.0 and what that means to sales and driving revenue. And so I want to point out a couple things about vocabulary that are important. First thing is that you hear a lot of people talking about social. Now, what we really have seen is that there is a three-legged stool that is very powerful right now, which is the Web 2.0 three-legged stool, which is social, mobile, and cloud. And those three things are inextricably tied together. And so, obviously, we wouldn't have social technologies if we did not have cloud delivery, because LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest, I mean, every hot social technology that comes along is done as a cloud-based application. And then today, over 50% of all of the social connections, over 55% of every time somebody searches on your business, they're doing it from a mobile device. And that's a critical thing to know, by the way, that we'll go back and talk about, is that over half of the people that will search on your business will search from a mobile device. So we cannot tear apart the fact that social is supported by mobile and cloud. Now, in social, there's three things I want you to understand. The vocabulary gets a bit confusing because the media probably uses the wrong terms in the wrong places. So what I want you to understand is, if you're going to be good at social and using social technologies in your sales process, there are three specific areas: social relevance, social media, and social networking. Now, social relevance is all about your online reputation. So it's all about what people, when they go online and search, what do they think of you personally, what do they think of your business, and then what do they think of your products. And all of those things create what your social relevance is. Right? Social media is anytime you're using media being video, infographics, PowerPoint presentations, documents, online documents, right? That's all media. When you're using media, okay, sites like YouTube, SlideShare, Flickr, Scribd, right? When you use sites like that, you are actually delivering content through social media. Now, that is different than social networking. Social networking, of course, would be LinkedIn, or Facebook, or Twitter, or blogging. And so I just want you to be able to draw distinctions between those three different areas. Now, we also have social being bolted in front of a lot of words these days, like, a social business. Well, all businesses will be social business. And there's social recruiting, which is like, how do we recruit new employees? Well, the vast majority of recruiting is going to involve social, okay? Or social CRM, well, all CRM is going to be social. So I just wanted to make the point that I think the word's a bit overused, and I think you're going to see that probably going forward in the future, we'll use the word social less and less, because it will just be assumed that everything has some social component to it. So I just wanted you to understand this bigger picture about what's going on with Web 2.0. Now, obviously, the outcome of this three-legged stool in Web 2.0 is huge impact on how consumers behave. Customers are very different today than what they've ever been like before. And, of course, then that's rebounding in tremendous changes inside of organizations. Now, I don't care whether, you're a three-person flower shop or whether you're a $100 million business, okay? Digital marketing is fundamentally changing how you find prospects and then how you build tight relationships with your customers, your clients, your constituents. And, boy, if you don't get that today, you're a bit in dangerous territory because what I always tell people is when it comes to digital marketing as a weapon, either you're going to teach your competitors how to use it or your competitors are going to teach you. And if you're going to wait for your competitors to teach you how to use these tools, I'm telling you that's a very dangerous place to be. All right. So let's look at some other background that might be interesting to you. This is a very interesting statistic here, and I really want to make sure you pay attention to this. Right? Inbound marketing, in other words, learning to use search engine optimization, learning to use digital marketing, blogging and your website and social tools and mobile applications to drive revenue, that's inbound marketing. Using that is 61% less per lead as far as the cost. And these are just some statistics that HubSpot came up with, but it's an important thing for you to understand is not only is digital marketing more effective, digital marketing is also less expensive. And so it's just an important distinction for you to understand. All right, let me just grab a couple of questions real quick. Some of these are easy. Will you have access to the slides after the meeting? Yes, you will. And so I can give you two different ways. I mean, one is you can always replay this webcast. Another way is if you want me to just send copies of the slides, you can just email me at scott@klososky.com. Just my name, and I'll be glad to email a set of the slides out to you. Differentiating between B2B and B2C, I will talk about as we go forward. And obviously, social technologies is just as powerful in B2B as it is in B2C, so is digital marketing. And so I just want to make that comment right off. I don't want anybody to think that those, that it's more or less powerful in one or the other. And I'll do some distinction between those things. I will give examples of things like how to do prospecting, and so some of the people that are asking questions like that will do that. Somebody asked, so Facebook is not social media, and that's right. Technically, Facebook is social networking. It's not social media, but that's what I tell you is that the press uses the terms in ways that will be confusing for you. And again, somebody is asking about what about digital marketing and B2B. Most of my clients, the majority of my clients are B2B clients. And so the majority of digital marketing work that we're doing is with B2B. It is just as powerful in B2B as it is in B2C. So I hope nobody's using that excuse that, hey, we're B2B, so we don't need to use that. Okay? Let's see. I think let's see. Let me answer one more, and then I'll go on. What is your most valuable tip to optimize email marketing? I would say the most valuable tip, I guess it's a couple of things. I can't just say one, but the most valuable thing I'll tell you about email marketing is you've got to draw a line between spamming people and providing value. And if you want to be really good at email marketing, you will look at email marketing more as a Trojan horse, and you will start asking yourself, how can I send emails that provide value to people? Where I earn the right to put a link in there that might be something that is marketing. Too many people look at email marketing as it's almost like an online infomercial where I can pound them on my products, and that doesn't work. Okay, people just tune it out, they delete them, it becomes spam in their mind. The best thing you can do with email marketing is almost like a strategy of what we do with blogging, which is create value with the emails. Right? Make sure you're sending content that's valuable to the person on the other end. That will make it again, you will earn the right to actually be able to market to them if you do that. So that's a quick thing I can tell you about email marketing. All right, let me go on. I'll jump back to some other questions here in a little bit. All right, I have to do this slide not necessarily because I want to, but because if I don't answer these questions, then people will ask me these questions and want to know later. And so this all goes to the topic of when people say to me, hey, Scott, what about LinkedIn, what about Twitter, what about blogging? But the bigger question they'll ask me is, hey, what are the basics that we have to do? They're like mandatory if we're a small or medium-sized business. So let me go through this real quick because this is my slide of what's mandatory. Okay? Now, I'm not saying Pinterest isn't valuable. Okay? I'm just telling you these things are mandatory that almost every business should do. All right, first thing is LinkedIn. Obviously, LinkedIn is like the modern-day Rolodex, except with a lot more power. Everybody, I don't care if you're a real estate agent, in insurance, it doesn't matter. Everyone should be using LinkedIn to connect to as many people as they can in their market area and as many prospects as possible. And then using LinkedIn to communicate to people, to set up the discussion groups, to find new employees when you need to hire, obviously to be able to create warm leads when you want to go do marketing. And so LinkedIn is mandatory. Everyone should be doing this. Like I said, it is just like the modern day Rolodex. And I don't mean just, You should be accepting people's invites. Like, learn how to use LinkedIn. All right, Facebook. Look, Facebook I love. It's appropriate for some companies, not as appropriate for others. Okay, I think it's mandatory as a tool to learn how to use. But as you move more and more to B2B, Facebook becomes less important as a marketing tool. As you're in B2C, it's more important. And so, Facebook's an important tool to learn, but it is not more important than anything else I have listed up here. All right, Twitter. Absolutely mandatory to do at least half of it. There are two sides of Twitter. One side is you talking to everybody in the world. The other side is you listening. In other words, who do you follow? What's mandatory is that you follow industry experts in your industry. So that's mandatory. You need to go out and identify. Use tools like Twello, okay? You can use Twello.com, and Twello will, hang on, I'm going to send it to you. Twello is something that anybody can do to go type in a keyword, and it'll show everybody, who all the experts in a field are. And so, right, Twitter, you want to go find 10, 20 experts in your field, follow what they say every day. That just creates a great river of information into your brain that will make you smarter. That's mandatory. Now, whether you use Twitter to talk to your customers or talk to everybody else, that's optional. That's just if it's the appropriate tool and if you have something important to say. Blogging, pretty much mandatory. For most businesses, the ability to be able to connect, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, to be able to connect to people in such a way that they can have a constant stream of information from you is a very powerful marketing tool. And so, again, I don't have a lot of time to go into detail about all the rules of best practices for blogging, but I just want you to know it's probably mandatory that you create a blogging strategy so that you can use it, again, as a Trojan horse to build relationships with customers and prospects. All right, social media sites, mandatory. Again, I don't care what business you're in. I would like to see you using some combination of uploading some videos onto a YouTube channel, creating some PowerPoints about what you do or your products or your services on SlideShare, maybe some white papers on Scribd, maybe some infographics or pictures or graphics on Flickr, right? But all of these are free sites that allow you to create channels, right, where you can upload content, and then you can use that content in lots of different ways. You can embed it in your website, which makes your website look nicer. You can use it to go out to bloggers if you want to deliver information out through bloggers. Okay, it will help your search engine optimization because more and more companies like Google are looking at how deep are you in the social sites as a measurement of how high should your website be. All right, next thing is listening and search tools. Okay, you have to use tools to listen for any mention of your name personally, any mention of your company's name, or any mention of your product's names, minimum, and then your competitors. So those four things you always have to listen for. Now, there are, at one end of the spectrum, the free, Google tools, right, that just do Google alerts. At the other end of the spectrum, there are tools like Sysmos and Radian 6, okay, that are professional enterprise class tools you have to pay a little bit of money for. But one way or the other, you've got to use some kind of tool to listen to what people are saying about you out in the world. And then the last thing that's mandatory is tools that help you aggregate information, right, or filter out important information. There's a whole bunch of free tools you can do for this as well. NetVibes is one, Flipboard, Google Reader, right? All tools that you could be using to help you aggregate information that would help you get smarter. Okay? Now, Tony quotes me on this every once in a while when I say it, but it's a knowledge economy, and in a knowledge economy, the smart people win. Okay? I want to say that to you again. In a knowledge economy, the smart people are going to win. When I tell you it's mandatory to be able to aggregate information and filter important information, what I'm telling you is there's a huge amount of information on your industry or your field, and that's everything from information on your competitors to your product lines to your industry. And every day you should be harvesting that information and getting it into your brain. This costs you nothing but time. That's all it costs you. And so I just, I'm begging you, you at least do these basics. Okay? If you do nothing else. All right. A couple of things I just want to define for you. You're going to hear me use the word customer intelligence. Okay? When I'm talking about customer intelligence, what I'm talking about is the ability to learn a lot of information about your customers. And again, I'm using customers generically. For you, it could be patients, it could be clients, it could be members, it could be constituents. Okay? I'm just going to say customers generically. Okay? But customer intelligence is basically the field of learning everything you can possibly learn about your customers, because, as I say below, the organization with the deepest amount of information and the ability to use it is going to win in the market. Now, let me make that clear to you. There are a lot of clients I walk into when I say, what do you know about your customers? They will say, hey, Scott, we know name, address, telephone number, and email address. And I ask, why do you know that? And they say, well, that we need that to bill people, right? So they need that to send an invoice. Well, if that's all you know, then I promise you, there's no way that you're going to be able to get to a point where you know those customers well enough that you can do very good individual marketing with them or drive their behavior. And so customer intelligence is all about learning way more about your customers than what you know today, and then being able to make that pay off for you. All right, let me answer a couple more questions here, and then I will jump. Yes.
I just want to mention to people listening, if you want to see the importance of customer intelligence, look at this last election. Obama won this election, and I had a meeting with Mark Benioff, who provided the technology they did this with, and they beat everybody in 2008 by really understanding social networking. They did this time by understanding truly mobile technology. They created the Obama app that their followers had, and they used that as a variety of ways to stay in touch with and communicate. But on the day of the election, they activated that app so that they knew where all the voters that were registered, that were within their database, where they were. Whether there's surveillance technology. They knew whether they'd gone there. They had people at the polls, digitally. They've always had that in paper in the past, saying who's actually made it to the poll today, who's not. And they literally digitally reached out to those individuals to make sure. They said, look, you're only 10 minutes from the polling booth, or whatever the case may be. Please go now. They also tapped into their Facebook list. They knew all the people on their Facebook who were likely voters. They knew everything about them, what their core issues are, what the elements are. Was it a woman who was concerned about, health care? Was it a Latino person who's concerned about the issues of immigration? And they reminded them specifically why they're voting in real time, and then said, would you please reach out, rather than having someone in a call center call out and call somebody and saying, are you going to go out there and vote for Obama today? They said, will you call these 3 people right now? And they did it all directly to their mobile phone. I mean, it was unbelievable. And on Romney's side, they had something called Orca, which was supposed to do something similar, and it blew up. And you have 100 electoral college difference between the two of them. But truthfully, there was only 354,000 votes that made a difference. All these states where, Ohio, 2%. On the popular vote, it was 2.4% difference. But the difference was Obama's people have been working for years to know everything they could about who their clients, who their constituency is, and who their constituency could be. It's all micro-targeting. It's probably the greatest example, bigger example than any company you're ever going to see is what you just saw happen in the last election.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's funny, I always try to stay out of using social, or when people ask me a lot of advice about using social technologies for politicians, I've always stayed out of it. But it's amazing the power that it has today.
It really does. You go back to the questions. I didn't mean to interject, but I just want to make sure that people get what he's really offering you here is the basics to start with. And he's going to talk with you about the strategies of how to execute. But these fundamentals have got to be done, and most businesses are doing some of them. One question I wanted to ask you, something as simple as LinkedIn, people often ask me, what's the best way to learn how to use LinkedIn besides the obvious that you can do just by banging around on the site? Is there something you recommend there, because it's such a valuable tool?
There's a lot of online tools. If you just typed in, how to learn LinkedIn, there's some tools. But I'll tell you the steps that I think that are really important. First of all, you got to make a decision of, should I be using the free version or should I be using the paid version? Like if you're in sales, right, or if you're responsible for driving revenue, you should probably pretty quickly think about, at least subscribing to the first paid version, which opens up some new capabilities to you. Right? It lets you work with more people all at once. It lets you do surveillance on people's status a little bit more. But I guess let me reduce to 3 things that I think you got to do with LinkedIn. 1, I think you want to connect to as many people as possible, so that when you have a question or a need, you can ask those people all at once with one click and reach out for help, which is a form of crowdsourcing, right? So that's one thing I would do. 2, you need to learn to have the capability to develop warm leads. So if you want to know who the CEO is of the local bank, you should be able to type in, find a name, and then find out who do you know who knows that person who can introduce you, right, or connect you on LinkedIn. So in other words, how do you make warm contacts using LinkedIn, which is what it was originally built for, by the way. Right? The third thing I think, which is critical, is learning to do surveillance. So you want to do surveillance on status, because if you have somebody that you're doing business with and then they leave a company and go somewhere else, you want to be the first one to know that, so that you can jump in and see if you can sell them at the new company they go to. Or let's just say you're in real estate. You absolutely want to do surveillance, because if somebody says that they've retired, if somebody says that they've changed jobs, right, if they change their status on LinkedIn, it would be a buying signal for you if you were in real estate. And so those are 3 things, just as examples, that you can learn to do with LinkedIn that would help drive revenue.
Fantastic.
All right. I put up a list real quick. So a number of people had asked for what some of the aggregation tools were. I also have a number of people that are asking for the listening tools. The listening tools, I'll tell you a couple things. Really, I can give you a lot of answers, but if you will just go on Google and search on listening tools, you'll see, a list of all different ones. But the tools that we like the best if you're a business are Sysmos, S-Y-S-M-O-S, and Radian 6, which is a Salesforce product that Tony knows well, right? So those would be the 2 that we would say we would like the most for a business. All right. Somebody just asked the question about Pinterest. They just said, how do you classify Pinterest, social media or social networking? And I classify it as social networking. Because, yes, you're putting up pictures on Pinterest and creating the pin board, right? But it's generally a networking site is what it's, what it's built for. Let's see. I'll answer one more question just to try to be helpful. Let's see. Somebody said they're not very familiar with aggregation. Okay, they don't understand what I mean by aggregation. That's a good call. Let me just explain that just for a second. When I talk about aggregating information and filtering information, all I'm saying is every day, let's just pick a business. Let's say that you're a dentist, okay? Every day there is megabytes of information that comes out on the dentist industry, everything from how to run a dentist practice to new techniques on what you would do with teeth and ortho exams. Okay, every day, huge amounts of information that comes out. There's new regulation information that comes out. Okay, when I say aggregation, what I mean is you are running software that is listening every day, that is trying to find everyone who's a thought leader, and you're pulling down all the information that might happen today in the dental space into one screen. That's called aggregating. And that way you can just in a quick 20 minutes, let's say at the end of the day, review everybody who said anything interesting today on the dental space. That's what we mean about aggregating and filtering. And so again, it's just, knowledge is power. We've all known that, right? We've talked about that all the time, that knowledge is power. It absolutely is. Man, we've got fantastic tools today to go get knowledge and pull it down off the internet, and so many people are just not doing it. It just hurts. It hurts me to know that people aren't trying to use these tools. All right. This slide may be one of the most important things that I'm going to go over with you. I talked about digital marketing. I told you I'd define it. I'm going to define it for you with a little bit added bonus to it, which is one-to-one digital marketing. Okay? One-to-one digital marketing is the hottest thing right now in how you drive revenue. And so one-to-one digital marketing is a concept that has basically 5 elements. And I'll go over them with you real quick. But the one-to-one means that we are going to use customer intelligence. And we're going to gather lots of information on our customers. And somebody, by the way, one of your questions, you asked me, well, what kinds of things should we gather? It's a good question. Instead of name, address, telephone number, and email, right, what if we gathered what kind of food people like to eat? We gather, of course, how old they are. We want to know what gender they are. What schools did they go to? There's different kinds of information you might want to gather depending on what kind of business you are. Okay, but what social sites do you prefer? There's probably 20, 30 fields of data that are really pretty easy to get. Most people would give them to you, or literally you could go get them yourself online. That would give you much more information on a customer. Now, if you mix what I just told you about customer intelligence, like if you have a ton of data, with now this digital marketing concept, then you can do one-to-one digital marketing. In other words, you can market uniquely to people. Look, Tony and I are different. Okay, we're different. Not only is he about 2 feet taller than me and much better looking, right? Not only is he that, the way he reads, the things that are interesting to him, the systems he uses to connect to people, very different than mine. So if you were going to market your services to Tony and I, even though we're both males, even though we're both about the same age, even though we're business people, there's a lot that's very different about us. And if you don't know those things, then what you'll do is spam us with the exact same kind of marketing, which would be wrong. All right? So digital marketing is 5 elements. It starts with web properties. Okay, the web property, your website is your destination, and then there's social technologies, and then there's mobile applications, right? Those 3 things create a net that you catch customers in. So they may do a search online, come to your website. They may see a blog about you or some of your social media content. They might come to you through a social connection. They might come to you from a mobile device, from standing at a soccer game. Who knows? Now, those 3 things are going to catch customers. And then there's traffic drivers. That's the 4th element, right? Is now how do you drive traffic into the first 3 elements, right? How do we drive traffic into our website? How do we drive traffic into creating connections with us on our blog or Facebook or LinkedIn? How do we drive traffic through our mobile applications? Okay, and then the last element is measurements. And so now how do we measure all of the things that are going on with these first 4 elements? Now, all of these things have to be integrated. And so that's a key that I want you to understand. Digital marketing is being really good at all 5 of these elements and integrating all of these elements together. Now, if you do that, and if you do good customer intelligence, then you will put together a pretty sophisticated ability to market. Now, I know some people look at things like this and they go, Scott, I own a hardware store, and I'm in a town of 50,000 people. Like, this sounds like way too much for me. And I just want you to understand it isn't, okay? I know it could sound overwhelming, but it isn't. We can take this model and we could apply it to a small business. We could apply it to a chiropractic practice, right? And say, look, how do we connect with, thousands of people in town? And how do we provide value by doing a blog on health and wellness out to all these people? And how do we use that blog to get them to click and go back to our website to take action from time to time? And how do we use traffic drivers, search engine optimization or search engine marketing to drive more people to our website and more people to connect to our blog, okay? And what you'd find out is we could build a very sophisticated digital marketing process to drive revenue for you, okay, which is, again, much less expensive than doing radio ads, right, buying space in newspapers, all of those kinds of things. So that's digital marketing, and hopefully that you understand the concept behind that. All right, the keys. I just wanted to go over the keys with you real quick. 1, you're trying to build unique relationships with people so that you have influence over them. Again, I don't care whether you're doing email marketing. I don't care whether it's using Twitter as a tool. I don't care what piece of social or digital marketing you're using. You're trying to build a unique relationship with people so they don't feel like they're being spammed, where you have influence over them. You can cause them to click on a link. You can cause them to go buy something. All right. Second thing is you've got to integrate all of these things, okay? The website, the social tools, the mobile versions of your website or the mobile applications, these are not standalone tools. In other words, on your website, you should be selling hard, people connecting to your social tools. When you send out a blog, you should be putting links in there trying to drive people back to the website. That's what we mean by integrating these tools. All right. Constituent-based design should be used. All that means, just a fancy way of saying, every time you build a website, every time you decide to design a blog, every time you decide to use Facebook, you should be asking yourself, who are the constituents? Who are the customer types that are going to be coming to this thing? And you should separate those out. Because let me tell you, a prospect is very different than a current customer, obviously. And so you want to design everything that you're doing with the customer in mind, right, or that specific constituent in mind. All right. When you do these things, they got to provide value to the receiver. This is a really important thing. Like when we teach people how to blog, I don't know how many times I've had to tell people over and over again, look, the blog is not an infomercial. The blog is not for you to talk about your products and services every single time you send something trying to sell. Okay, that's not what a blog is. A blog is a stream of communication with your audience that is going to be valuable to them, that's going to help their lives, and that will earn you the right. It will earn you the right to do some marketing every once in a while. Look, companies like Chick-fil-A have a 4-to-1 rule. You have to say 4 personal things on Facebook before you're ever allowed to talk about a chicken sandwich. I got other clients that have 10-to-1 rules. Okay? So it's got to provide value to people and not be an infomercial if you want to connect with them. And then the last thing, I preach this all the time, measure, 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 measure. Okay? If you're going to be good at digital marketing, you got to be able to measure everything that you're doing so you know what's working and what isn't working. All right. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this graphic. I just want to make a couple of quick points to you. This is just a visual representation of what's happened with the customer relationship these days. And the easiest way I could explain this to you is you go back 20 years. 20 years ago, we had word of mouth and traditional advertising, PR, marketing, and what we tried to do was use those things to create leads or prospects, and then we had to drive those to have an in-person contact. So, in other words, you had to talk to somebody on the phone or you had to meet them in person. And that's the way it was from 20 years ago on back in history. Well, we got the web, let's say 15 years ago, and we thought this is fantastic. Now we have these websites and we can put it up and it could sell and tell everybody about us. We don't need as many salespeople or human beings anymore. That's what we thought. But there were some real unintended consequences that came from building websites. And that unintended consequence was it broke the human connection with a lot of people. And although I'm a technologist, I'm a businessman first. And I just want you to understand, you'll hear me talk a lot about man-machine, right? That there is an appropriate time to use a machine or technology, and there is an appropriate time to use a human being. And we are starting to get those things dorked up these days. And so, in other words, we're trying to use machines too much in some cases, and people too much in others. Well, websites that had e-commerce and all that kind of thing are great, but for some industries, all it did was it broke the human connection and it just commoditized the products. So car insurance is a good example. Back when I was a kid, we bought car insurance from somebody sitting at the kitchen table. Right? Today you buy car insurance by going online, you search across 7 different things, you pick one and you buy it. Right? They've commoditized that whole industry because of their websites. So the good thing we've gotten is that social technology has jumped in and allowed us to now create a connection between people. So it's put a little bit of the human being back in things. So now instead of somebody coming to the website, we have no idea who they were. They might buy something, they might not, and then they leave. Right? We now have an ability to start connecting to people through social technologies, so that we put a little of the human connection back in these sales processes. And obviously what we're trying to have happen is that we do a great job with customers. They make good online recommendations about us, and then that causes electronic word of mouth, right? So then new customers come back to our company and take action. So, I don't want to go real deep into this, just to understand that, hey, the technology has integrated itself into the sales process for almost all of us. There are good things about that. There are dangerous things about that. And I just want you to be aware of that. And so, you're just careful about when to use what. But if all you have is a website today, you just have a website, and you're not doing anything with social technologies to create a connection with people, you're probably only really doing half of the equation. All right, which brings us to this term of S-commerce. S-commerce, of course, is just for social commerce. It is the next step past e-commerce. So S-commerce, social commerce, is, if you look at these bullet points down here, it's this new world where now, people make ratings and recommendations online about your products and about your, about your services. And we'll talk about that more here in just a second, right? But now people are getting much more input from their friends or tastemakers. So they're looking to people who are centers of influence online to tell them what products they should buy or not buy. I mean, we've got companies now that are crowdfunding using things like Kickstarter to get their ideas off the ground. We even have now group purchasing online where if you want to buy something and you need the help from 3 of your friends or your family, you can get 5 of you to get together and buy something, right? So social is changing the way we buy. And I just wanted you to have that thought. To get more detailed around that, for example, one of the things social's doing is it has created what's called the recommendation economy. Now, when we talk about the recommendation economy, what I'm saying is it used to be a research economy. Okay? So it used to be when somebody bought anything over $100, they did a lot of research into that. Today, we're more and more just a recommendation economy. So you buy something over $100, you go online and you check to see what everybody else says about that item or about that service. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with sites like Angie's List. Okay? If you go to Angie's List, you're going to see all kinds of recommendations of garage door opening companies and heat and air and lawyers and especially doctors and dentists and chiropractors. Right? And so Angie's List is a 100% recommendation site. Now, all of this recommendation economy has created what's called the Net Promoter Score, or the NPS. If you're not familiar with that, I just ask you to go search it online. Don't ask a ton of questions because I don't have time to answer in detail about Net Promoter Score. But the basic premise is if you want to understand how well you're doing with your customers, you ask one question. And that question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend me to family and friends? If you get a 9 or a 10, then they're very likely to recommend you. If you get anything below an 8, it means they're likely to not recommend you. So this NPS score has gotten to be a very powerful metric on Wall Street, where Wall Street will, in their earnings calls, will often ask people, hey, what is your NPS? Because what they've figured out is companies that have a Net Promoter Score of a 9 or above don't have to spend that much money in marketing because everybody's talking about them. Companies that have, let's say, a 6, they're going to have to spend a lot of money on marketing and advertising to get that next sale. And so I just want you to understand the concept that technology is driving this, this Net Promoter Score and this kind of recommendation economy philosophy. So that's why it's critical for you to understand, right, how to use a lot of these online tools. All right, let me jump in and ask a few more questions. Somebody says, Angie's List is successful. That's true. Where can I get someone to develop my S-commerce site or my Net Promoter Score? Hey, there are companies that will do that for you, that will do Net Promoter Score for you, or you can do it yourself. And again, you can go search for it online, and you'll see a bunch of companies that'll come do those surveys for you, and they'll charge you. They'll do all the analytics, right? Or you can just do NPS on your own and try to evaluate it. But if you want to learn about it, just go online, just search for Net Promoter Score, and you will see that. All right, let's see. It seems like S-commerce may be more appropriate than B2C. There are actually two different things, right? B2C is really talking about business to consumer as far as the way that the sales are going. S-commerce actually works across B2B and B2C. Just so you're not confused, I just want to make sure you understand that differentiation. S-commerce impacts B2B as well. All right, let's see. I'm just looking through. We just got a ton of questions coming, so just trying to pick out some good ones. Do you think Europe is a bit behind on this? Great question. What I'm finding is that Europe is about 1.5 years behind, and there are some interesting things about it, like Germany is very privacy-oriented and has pretty harsh privacy laws. And so they have stunted the growth of social a little bit in Germany. So they've also, by the way, stunted the growth of things like customer intelligence because of that. So yes, we're seeing that Europe is probably, let's say, a year and a half behind us here in the U.S. I have a friend who refuses to ask customers personal questions or do surveys because he thinks it's offensive. Where and how do you collect customer information? And I hear this a bit where people say, hey, I think it's offensive to ask people questions or that I'm invading their privacy. Look, that might be a personal issue, like that you feel. If you look around the world right now, customers are very willing to give you information if you ask for it, and then two, if you give them some kind of quid pro quo. So in other words, if you give them something for the information, you could give them a T-shirt, you could give them a free video. I mean, there's lots of things you can give people as an enticement. But I would just tell you, there's a saying that I loved, that I've always loved, that talks about obstacles that aren't really there, right, that we see. And so when you say to yourself, well, I think I'm invading people's privacy to learn more about them, that's absolutely the opposite way that you should think about it. The way you should think about it is, the more I know about my customers, the better service I can provide. So if I'm looking at you in the eye and I'm asking you some questions, and you say, well, gee, you sure ask a lot of questions, I would say, look, I'm asking them so I can be a better service provider to you or a better vendor to you. It's the only reason I'm asking, because the more I know about you, the better service I can provide. For instance, if I know what kind of food you like, maybe on your birthday I can send you a gift certificate for a Thai restaurant because you said you love Thai. But if you don't tell me you love Thai, how could I ever send you the gift certificate? So I look at gathering information completely differently. It's not an invasion of privacy. It's just helping me be able to be a better provider for you. All right, somebody asked, what about Australia? How far behind? Australia is not that far behind. Australia is doing a fantastic job with technology, in my opinion, from what I've seen. So I really don't see Australia very far behind the U.S. if we're talking about the U.S. as a comparison. All right, let me answer one more question, and then we'll go back. Let's see. All right, so somebody just did ask the question about, wow, this is really, really overwhelming. There's a lot here. Are there just a couple things that we should really focus on? And again, I just want to tell you, that would be like looking at a toolbox with all kinds of tools in it, and you asking me, well, which tool is the most important tool? And I tell you, oh, well, grab the hammer and grab a flathead screwdriver, okay? I could tell you that, but the moment you go try to do whatever you're going to go do, you're going to need a Phillips head, you're going to need a socket set, you're going to need a Dremel tool, okay? There just isn't a way to say, hey, let's take digital marketing down to just 2 or 3 things and make it that simple. In fact, I'm getting ready to make it even a bit more complicated. Let's talk about B2B, right? We're getting a little bit more into B2B and what's going on with sales dynamics. All right, this one's pretty simple. I just wanted to explain that today, every product or service is hitting the market, and it is either a commodity product. All right, in other words, we can put it up on a website and somebody can buy it through self-service. A camera is that way. Okay? I mean, if you need to buy a camera today, you can go online, you can do a search, you can find the camera, you can buy it. You don't need a human being to help you. On the other end of the spectrum, there are very complicated services that need a human being. Okay? So if you're going to buy a very expensive piece of software, you're not going to buy that online without talking to a human being. So it's more full service. Now, what we're seeing as far as sales that's interesting out in the world is on the complicated side, buyers don't want they don't want peddlers, right? They don't want salespeople. They want industry experts. And on the other end of the spectrum, on the commodity side, buyers don't want salespeople because it's self-serve, so they can just do the work on their own. They don't need somebody. So what this means is more and more we're seeing that people don't like salespeople. If I just say that in general, hopefully that's not hurting anybody's feelings. Okay, but they don't want to be sold. They don't want to have their arm twisted behind their back. They don't want to feel like they're dealing with a commission-hungry peddler who doesn't really care about them. Okay? Today, either people want to buy stuff self-serve online, or they want to deal with somebody who is an industry expert, not a peddler. Now, the reason that I'm bringing that up is that we're seeing the sales dynamic out in the world change a lot. And so I can explain it to you this way. This is a common kind of chart of what a sales process looks like, especially in a B2B company. And so if you look at this, you'd say, all right, well, the top line defines what a buyer does. The bottom line defines what a salesperson typically does, right? We identify a lead, we qualify, then we do discovery on what their problem or their pain is, we present a solution, we negotiate, and we close. I don't care what business I walk into that's B2B, right? They got something like this as a sales model. Now, that's all great, it's lovely, but this is what's happening. Today, a customer is driving this process in a much different way. They are not going down logical steps. It's getting very complicated. And I will demonstrate this with one statistic. I'm just going to give you one statistic. The statistic is that what research is showing today is that by the time somebody gets in contact with you to ask you questions, they are 67% of the way down towards making a decision. Okay? So go back 20 years ago, is by the time somebody called you to ask you for more information about your product or service, they were only, let's say, 10% through making a decision. Today, somebody is 67%. In other words, they are dramatically down the road at making a decision on whether they're going to do business with you or a competitor by the time they have even called you, right, or gotten in touch with you online. So in other words, it is really difficult today to drive a sales process. Now, let me show it to you a different way. Now, I know this is going to get kind of geeky on the sales side. I love sales. I love the process of sales. But what I'm a specialist in is that hybrid of where does sales cross technology. And so I love CRM systems. In fact, today I'm trying to get people to build social XRM systems instead of CRM systems. So, I'm very geeky about sales. I just want to make a point for you that might help you. Today, many of you are asking this question: where can I find new customers? And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to increase demand, right? You're trying to get more customers that you can get into your sales funnel so that you can drive them down into a closed sale. Very common thing. And if you look at this chart, again, a very common chart that shows, if we now look over on the left side of that chart, right, we look at what the buyer does. What's clear is if you can get in touch with a buyer earlier when they're just trying to determine their requirements, you can become a trusted advisor. This is not new news to most of you, right? You've always known that, for instance, if you could help somebody write a request for proposal, an RFP, then you have a much better chance of winning it, right? So in other words, you're involved in the sale earlier. Now, remember what I told you. Today, what's happening is people are going online, they're searching for recommendations, they're looking at your online reputation, right? They're learning all of this stuff before they ever call you. So you're not getting involved till way down to the red where you're just a vendor. That's a bad place to be. So what we want to do, if you're in B2B especially, is you want to change it to look more like this. Instead of asking that question, where do I find more customers, you say, how can new customers find me? And that is not a small change. Let me say it to you this way. You want to create an environment in which customers can find you more easily, or you want to create an environment in which your salespeople can close more sales. Now, the way we do that is that if we get really good with digital marketing, okay, in other words, I say here significant web and social influence, but digital marketing, if you get really good with digital marketing, what you're going to find is you will become very findable, right? You'll become very findable online, and buyers will find you earlier in their buying process. So let me tie together a few things that I'm saying. When I told you to do social media, and I said that you should put out videos and PowerPoints and content like that, what we would call digital assets on social media sites, when you index those with your keywords, what it means now is when a prospect is searching for your service or product, they can't help but trip across some of your social media assets online, which are going to drive them back to your website. That's where I talked to you about integrating, right, social and your website. So I could pull a lot of these things I've told you so far together into, we want to make sure that a prospect, right, a new sale, finds us earlier than they find our competitors. Well, I'm telling you, the only way to do that is to be very good at digital marketing. But if you do that, right, if you create a landmine on the web of your assets and your digital marketing tools, and you become very findable, It just means that you'll have prospects finding you earlier in their sales process. They'll get in touch with you before they're 67% done with their decision, and then that way you'll be able to close more sales. Okay? So just think about that distinction between, instead of saying, how do I find more customers, saying to yourself, how do I create an environment in which customers can find me? All right. You can look at it this way, okay? For those of you that are really into sales, I want to explain it to you this way because you'll understand this. I started learning how to sell, right? I started learning about how to be a salesperson, and I literally almost knocked doors selling office supplies back in 1980. And so I came up learning how to do sales traditionally. When I was first taught sales, it was all about relationship selling. Okay, relationship selling is all about how do you build a relationship with somebody so that you're friends, so that someday you can look them in the eye and go, dude, I'm going to need you to hook a brother up, right? I need a sale. And you put your arm around them, you look them right in the eye, and you hope they give you a sale. But you were depending on that relationship to get you the sale. All right, in the 90s, we moved more to solution-oriented selling. Okay, so that was find the pain, find the cure, or make them sick and make them well. So this was much more an environment where now, not only did we have to have a good relationship, now we had to actually have a product or a service that solved a problem for somebody if we wanted to close. Today, we've moved to CRM-based selling, right? So you should be familiar with that. Any of you that are B2B, certainly, right? We're driving people down the sales funnel, right? We're using those 7 steps I showed you earlier. Okay, it's a very rigid process. Now, when I say you've got to do socially facilitated selling, that is a term that we use a lot now, SFS, socially facilitated selling. What that means is we apply digital marketing tools to drive revenue. And so I just wanted to put this in perspective with you. For those of you that are B2B especially, okay, you have to always do those things. You've always got to do relationship selling. You got to do solution-oriented selling. Got to do CRM systems. Got to have all that. But today, if you don't add a good SFS layer, you will not win in the market for the next 5, 10 years. And I'm not saying you're going to lose everything next year. What I'm saying is if you put in a good SFS system, you will slowly, gain 10, 20% more in sales every year. Okay? And again, socially facilitated selling is just a term of art, right, where we are using a collection of digital marketing tools to create an environment in which our sales force can close more sales. That's all socially facilitated selling means. By the way, on B2C, it's called socially directed buying. Okay? It's the same concept of, hey, we've always had advertising, marketing, and PR, but today in B2C we have socially directed buying, okay, which is the term of art there. Now, again, I know I'm going through these things really quickly, but we're just trying to expose you to a lot of the different concepts and ideas so that you understand these things well. All right, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking to you about socially facilitated selling just for the B2B people. But I'll try to also just tell you about B2C and the socially directed buying as I go along. Now, socially facilitated selling is made up of a list of different things that you can possibly do, right? And I'm going to go over some of these here in a second, but let's stop and answer some questions, as I said, just to break things up. All right, what does CRM stand for? Customer Relationship Management. Okay, that's what CRM stands for, Customer Relationship Management. And it's a piece of software normally that's a very powerful piece of software today that most of you should be running. Now, just to make it cool, I'm going to do this because I love to do this for my friends. I'm going to tell you what's really cool today. Don't even say CRM, say XRM. XRM is the new generation of CRM. XRM means just relationship management. The X means for anyone. Okay, so XRM just stands for anyone. So, for instance, you can use a relationship management system in a prison to manage prisoners. You can use a relationship management system in a school to manage students. But when you use it in a company, when we say XRM, what we're saying is we will use the same piece of software to manage customers as we might manage our vendors, as we might manage our partners, right, prospects. And so that's all XRM means. But I just wanted to give you, if you want to be cool, talk about XRM and not CRM. All right. Somebody asked a great question, which is how does SFS work with a distributor-based sales channel? Awesome question. I deal with this quite a bit. So, and this ties in with what we just said with XRM. If you're running an XRM system, what you would say is, hey, I got a couple different types of customers. I have a distributor, which is a customer, right, the distribution people or the buyers, and then I have an end customer who's actually going to buy my product. Now, some of you are going to say things to me like, hey, I don't know who my end customer is. Okay, I don't like that, and I don't agree with that philosophy. Even if you are selling through distributors, you should do everything you can to try to gain information on who your end customers are. And I know that can be a big thought for some of you, but SFS, I mean socially facilitated selling, we would apply this to selling through distributors by making sure that we're doing the best job we can of arming our distributors to sell into the market for us and add new distributors. But then again, we would try to apply SFS by learning everything we can possibly learn about the end customer of our product. All right, somebody asked how far is Latin America behind the U.S. I would say probably at least a couple years. And so when I'm doing work down in Mexico or South America, a couple years. But let me make a clarification on that. In many parts of Latin America, they are ahead of the U.S. with using social tools. So like Twitter in Brazil, they're ahead of the U.S. as far as adoption. Okay? But when we talk about the enterprise use or the business use of social tools, I would say Latin America is probably a couple years behind. So at the personal level, they're doing great. At the business level, they're just really a bit slow at putting these tools in place, which could be an opportunity for you if you're actually from Latin America right now. All right, let me go over a couple other ones here. All right, so somebody asked, how does this work in healthcare with doctors? An example, and so in healthcare you have patients, but the patients equate to customers in my mind. Same thing with doctors and dentists. I actually think that digital marketing and socially facilitated selling can have a explosive impact on doctors and dentists. Today, doctors and dentists, people in the healthcare community, a lot of them, even hospitals, they've marketed with traditional advertising. So they've bought Yellow Pages ads, maybe they've done billboards, or they buy ads in the newspaper. So they've been very traditional marketing oriented. Oh my gosh, they have such potential to put out a blog. Let's say you're a doctor. You have such potential to keep in touch with every patient who has ever come to you by using a blog that you send out once a month, right, that just has health information in it. And then every month you would be touching those patients or former patients with something that's valuable to them. Now, that's going to earn you so much goodwill, so much word of mouth, right? So there's a huge amount of things that you can do in the healthcare space with all of these. In fact, I almost think these tools could be better used in healthcare than they can in like some of the retail spaces. But yet, for some reason, healthcare people seem to think that they live in a different world, right, and that these tools don't apply as well, and it is just not true. So if you're in healthcare, I really hope you would try to put some of these things to work. All right. Let's see. What else could I answer here that's good? Just give me a second while I look through these. Somebody asked about EWOM. I used that on a slide. That just stands for e-word of mouth. Sorry about that. I probably should have wrote that out. Just stands for e-word of mouth, electronic word of mouth, right? The difference between what you say with your mouth to a bunch of people versus what you post online. What you post online is electronic word of mouth, which obviously is very fast and much more powerful. Okay, could we outsource this to a social media business? And how would you evaluate who to hire? That is a great question. I would tell you, you got to be very, very careful. There are a lot of new people that are in the industry right now that aren't really that good at this, but that have hung out their shingle. And so I would tell you, first of all, be very discerning about who you hire. The other thing I would tell you is please learn how to do some of the stuff with your own hands. I'll give you a good example. Pay-per-click, right, or search engine marketing. Before you hire somebody to do that work for you, you really need to start your own account on Google, buy some keywords, and learn how to do pay-per-click with your own hands, then farm it out. I'll give you another answer. If you want to make sure that you work with somebody you trust, there is a company, BBI, which some of you would be familiar with, which Tony is a partner in, and BBI provides a lot of these services. In fact, they understand this digital marketing paradigm very well. And so, if you need help with SEO, if you need help with a website, if you need help with some of these things, Business Breakthroughs International, you might just reach out to BBI. That would be one place that you could go to for help. All right, let's see if I can clear up anything else. Okay, somebody asked what countries are ahead of the U.S. If we're talking about what countries are using digital marketing better than the U.S., I don't see anyone that is ahead of the U.S. If you ask what countries are ahead with using social tools, Russia, the people in Russia spend more minutes per month using social tools than we do, right? Obviously, Japan does more transactions on a mobile device than we do in the U.S., right? So there are certain things in technology that there are a lot of countries that do better than us, but if you're just talking about digital marketing, I have not found a country that generally is in front of the U.S. All right. Let me go on, and we'll come back to some of these questions here in a few minutes. All right. The list of things here on the socially facilitated selling slide, I don't want to go over all these individually necessarily, but what I wanted you to just see is that when a client asks us to come help them with socially facilitated selling, and they say, hey, Scott, we want you guys to come help us write our strategy, right? Help us build out a strategy for 2013. Here are the kinds of things we would do. Like we would start off and say, all right, hey, the sales you're closing now, let's start asking some of these people, did you search online? How did you find us? What role did digital marketing play? So we would, in other words, start doing some forensics so we could kind of get an idea of like today the sales were closing, what are people doing? Then we're going to do a second step, which is critical, which is what we call creating air cover, right? We want to manage the firm, the company's online reputation. We want to create an organizational voice. The organizational voice, by the way, is just the blog, the Twitter stream, the Facebook, right? It's anything that we're using electronic to talk to our customers. That's called the organizational voice, right? So we're going to do that. We're going to put out, again, social media, videos, PowerPoints. We're going to post all these things online. Now, doing those three things starts to create air cover for our sales team so that anybody that's trying to sell is going to have an easier road to sell. All right, third thing, we're going to improve customer intelligence. I explained that to you, right? So that's just we're going to learn more about our customers. We're going to get that into a CRM system so we can do social CRM because the more we know about the customers, the more we can serve them, right? The better relationship we can build with them. We're going to develop methods for prospecting. So in other words, we're going to try to figure out, well, if we get everybody in the city to read our blog, or if we start monitoring people's status changes on LinkedIn from all over the city, how can we use those things to try to find leads or find prospects? We're going to train salespeople, right, because they need to understand how to use all these tools. We're actually going to change maybe what we hold salespeople accountable for. Like I'll give you a basic one. I mean, how many people say to your sales force that the minimum number of LinkedIn accounts that you have is 500, right? Because if you work for me, I promise you I would say don't even bother working for me unless you got at least 500 connections on LinkedIn. And next year, you're going to have 1,000 connections on LinkedIn, right? So that's what I'm talking about, new accountability metrics. There are new things that we can hold people accountable in our sales force to that will help them be better at social. All right, we absolutely want to use digital marketing to provide competitor and market alert system. In other words, that river of information I told you about, where we're running a listening system and we're listening to our competitors and everything they're doing online, that's what I'm talking about, right? We want to make sure we know instantly anything our competitor does. They put something new up on their website, we want to know in an instant, right? They blog about a new company that they're doing business with, we want to know in an instant. All right? All the way down to applying gamification techniques, which, gamification, of course, is just applying game principles like reward systems or status systems to try to drive sales. That's a whole new field now, by the way, gamification. And then, of course, developing whole new analytics and measurements, which is always the last thing I'm always going to say in a process, is how are we going to measure now, are we good at socially facilitated selling? So I know, I know I could probably sit here and talk about this slide for an hour, but what I just wanted to show you is how sophisticated we're getting today at building an SFS system to drive revenue. Because remember, one of the things we're trying to do with technology is we're trying to create a machine that helps drive revenue for you. Now, I told you before, too, you've got to have people. So I'm not saying we don't need salespeople. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying we got to create an environment that the salespeople can sell more, and we want to create a machine that is going to constantly drive more revenue for us. So, in fact, if I look at the salesperson of the future and I say, what are they going to have to be able to do? Here's a few points. If any salesperson's working for me, like this is the minimum, they're going to have to know how to manage their own online reputation. And the reason they are is that thing I told you about being an industry expert. Okay, if you're just a peddler, if all you do is just go try to twist arms, okay, when somebody searches for you online, and they will, they're going to see that you don't have any presence and that you're not an expert. And so I want all my salespeople to manage their own personal online reputations so that it's clear that they are an expert in their field, so when a customer or a prospect searches on that person, they see something good. Why is that important to me? Because oftentimes the salesperson is the first one in your company that's creating an impression. And I want to make sure their online reputation doesn't get you in trouble. All right. Second thing, a salesperson's got to be fantastic at doing social networking. Again, if they can't use LinkedIn, or even tools like Jigsaw or Spoke, right, which are all sales tools people can use to do networking, if you don't know how to use these tools, it's going to be very difficult for you to compete with younger salespeople that are fantastic at using these tools. All right. You got to be adept at creating digital, online content. So when we talk about social media, the use of videos, of PowerPoints, of white papers and infographics, things like that, it's critical today, right, that salespeople know how to deliver these digital assets to try to help close sales. And then, of course, that last thing, customer intelligence, social CRM. If salespeople aren't willing to gather the information you need, the whole system breaks down. If salespeople think that have a name, address, telephone number, like what they got off a business card, if they think that's enough, you got problems. Okay? So in other words, if they haven't bought into the whole concept of learn more about your customers and then use that information to sell, they're not going to be very good in the market. And so I could probably go on, right? But those are like the four basic things that if I've got somebody that is a salesperson that works for me, they're going to have to be able to do. All right. Let me kind of go on to this last thought, and then I'll answer a few more questions for you, and then we'll kind of close up the session. I appreciate everybody being online. We have a ton of people that are on live with us today, and I really, really hope that some of the things that we have said today between Tony and I will make a difference for you. Those of you that know us well, and the only reason we do this is we're trying to make a difference for you. Okay, we took time out of this day and we gave this a lot of thought and put this together, just so hopefully today across the thousands of you that are listening, like we'd make a huge difference. So hopefully we are. All right. One last thought I just want to tell you is, going forward, and I spend a lot of my time looking forward into the future, I just want you to be very clear that if you want to increase revenue, you will have to learn to use things like socially facilitated selling. Right? You'll have to learn to use things like digital marketing. I really want you to look up. Again, I don't care how large or how small you are as a business. You have to go to school on the fact that we have lost, in the last decade, we have lost companies like Polaroid, Kodak went bankrupt, Spiegel Catalog went out, almost a 100-year-old company. Blockbuster, had to file bankruptcy. Borders had to shut down, Borders Books. It's scary when you look at the list of organizations that have had to literally just go bankrupt. And some are, going to at least survive out of bankruptcy, but some are just going to flat die. Just like they laid down and died. And in almost every case, you could look back and see they did not understand how technology was going to impact their market. Look, I told you, I'm half businessman and I'm half technology guy. And so as that kind of crossbreed, when I look forward into the future, it's very clear to me that there are going to be companies that learn to use tools like digital marketing and socially facilitated selling, socially directed buying in the B2C, and those organizations are going to prosper. Much like if we compare two companies, let's look at Borders Books, and then let's look at Barnes & Noble. Barnes & Noble is still with us today. Barnes & Noble finally came out with an e-reader called the Nook, and the reason that Barnes & Noble is still with us is they finally said, hey, you know what, we can't keep selling paper books the rest of our lives. We're going to have to sell e-books as well. And because they now have to sell both, they will live. Because Borders didn't, they died. And I can't make it clearer to you that if you don't learn to use some of these tools that we've talked about, you really are putting yourself in danger, and we just don't want to see you be there. All right, so let me answer a few more questions for you. All right, yeah, somebody just made the comment that Hostess just announced a shutdown. I see every day, I look in the news, I see companies that are struggling, and some of them, it might be like with Hostess, it's unions and it's issues like that, but so many of them, it is a problem with technology, that they just did not understand what's going on. All right. Let's see. Somebody said, what good book do you recommend to learn about these issues? One that you might find interesting, one of the books that I wrote is called Enterprise Social Technology. Okay, Enterprise Social Technologies, and it's a book that we crowdsourced. And so you might have noticed, when Tony was talking about me, it said on there that we were the first ones to ever crowdsource a book all the way through, and that's the book we crowdsourced, Enterprise Social Technologies. That book covers like a whole chapter on socially facilitated selling and socially directed buying. Okay, so it has a lot of things in it like that. So you can get it, you can download it. It's on Amazon. You can buy the book. It's been out for a little over a year, but it's called Enterprise Social Technology. It's a great primer. It's 12 steps to how do you put social technologies into your business. And so you might just give that one a shot. All right, somebody asked me, and it's fair enough, said, hey, could you expand on socially directed buying? And just in a couple minutes, again, I couldn't talk about both SDB and socially facilitated selling all in this time frame, but socially directed buying is how do you pull out a set of social tools out of the bag to drive consumer sales, right, or consumer relationships. And so it's just a different set of tools than we might pull out for SFS. So in socially facilitated selling, we're trying to create an environment to help our salespeople. In socially directed buying, we're trying to create an environment that drives consumer behavior. So let's say a viral video might be an example. Maybe in socially directed buying, we create a branding video that's very funny, cool branding video. And we put it out, hopefully, trying to get 1 million people to view our video, right, so that they will, buy the product. Or let's just take a restaurant, for example. A socially directed buying strategy would be having a restaurant connect through Twitter with a bunch of their customers. And then when a restaurant needs to drive revenue, they tweet out, hey, for the next 4 hours, we're giving a free dessert with meals. And then for that 4 hours, they drive 100 customers in by using that technique. Okay, that's actually called a revenue on demand technique. Okay, so there's lots of things like that that we do in socially directed buying. Somebody said, can you repeat your email address? It's just my name, okay? So my email address is just scott@klososky.com. All right, I'm going to answer one more question, and then we're going to start wrapping it up. All right, somebody asked, what is ORM? And again, I always forget, and I use initials, and then I feel bad about that. ORM stands for Online Reputation Management, okay? Online Reputation Management, okay? ORM is a system. It's a process. And there are 3 steps to this process. The steps are, 1, you have to have a listening system, right? You have to be able to listen for all the mentions of your name, your company's names, your product names, your competitors' names. Okay, that's the first step. Second step is you have to have an engagement policy. When people are talking about you online, what are they saying? Okay? and there's a whole thing I can teach you around an engagement policy, okay, about how you do it. What do you say when somebody says something negative? How do you respond? What if they say something positive? How do you respond? Say something neutral, how do you respond? Right? So you have to have an engagement policy. Third step is all measurements. So what's my sentiment ratio of positives versus negatives? Okay? Or how many mentions do I get a day? You want a lot of mentions, by the way. One of the worst things that could happen is that you're invisible. Like if you go online and search today, in fact, if you've never done it, there's a site called socialmention.com. I'll put it in for you. Socialmention.com. Just go there and type in anything you want to see. If you want to see somebody is talking about you, and it'll bring up if anybody is saying anything. If you've never done it, just go try it. If you're invisible, if nobody's talking about you or your company, that's a bad thing, right? So one of the things we want to measure in our online reputation is how many mentions of us are there online. Okay, so make sure you do that. So that's what ORM is. All right, we got to start wrapping up. I mean, let me just say this too. Thank you for everybody getting on. Again, we really hope that the time that you just invested, that something that we said between Tony and I will help you tremendously today. That's what we're in this for. Yeah, there you go. Be more helpful. So you've got to go apply now, right, at that link. And again, I said, it's almost sold out. This thing's really popular, and we always have a huge crowd. And so if you want to know more, at least from me, and then if you want all the other really great content that Tony lines up, please hook it up and go to that link. I know there's probably some other details that Scott could walk you through. Scott, is there anything you want to add?
Absolutely. First of all, Scott, Tony just wants to personally thank you for doing an amazing job. And he wanted to wrap up this call, but for all the callers that are right now, we do a business mastery once a year in London, and then we do it once a year in the United States. But he's having dinner right now with President Bill Clinton. So, Scotty, he just wanted me to thank you. So we just go forward. I just want to answer just a couple questions here. The first question, who is business mastery for? So that's a great question, by the way, because we get that asked all the time. So business mastery is for, basically a startup company. So anyone that's starting up a business or thinking of starting up a business, and they want to guarantee insurance plan for success. So they'll learn the right tools, the right strategies, the right tactics. So they're not going to make that money and just have it sift through their hands year after year like we've all done in business over the past. Is, a business is not doing well, and they want to turn it around now. Like Scotty just touched on one of the 7 forces that we teach at Business Mastery, and he just did just a basically small piece of what he's going to do at Business Mastery. And I know each and every one of you got great value out of what he just did. And piece is like it's for a business owner or business that is getting great results, and the reason why they're getting great results is because they're always investing in the business. They're always investing in themselves, and they're looking at how can we go and take this to the next level. Because Tony always asks this question, has the market economy changed over the last 2 years? And absolutely. And, he totally changed. And Tony talks about right now being in winter. And in winter, there's 2 options. You go snowboard and ski, or you go out there and freeze to death and you're no longer in business. But what's great about these times, and, this is the reason why Tony, started Business Mastery in 2008 and warning the exact same thing, is for this simple thing. There's going to be more money made in the next 100, right now, in the next 18 to 24 months than there has been in the last 100 years. You look at it, big companies coming small companies coming big. It happens all the time. You take a good company, General Motors was a good company, and they went broke if it wasn't for the United States, banking system. So then Tony brought this down because he's passionate about business. He personally owns 14 different companies. And in 2008, when the whole world economy crashed, he looked at, how can we make the biggest difference? And if you look at the GDP, 68% of the GDP right now is made up of small and medium-sized business. So he looked at that piece, and he looked at the next piece, and he says, oh my gosh, he says 50% of businesses go broke first year. And he looked at the stats, and he went down the stats, and he said, after 5 years, 80% of the businesses go broke. And after 10 years, 96% of businesses fail because they don't have the right tools, the right strategy. They're not mastering the business. What we can teach you at Business Mastery, 7 steps that you absolutely must master to get those unbelievable results. And that's what Business Mastery is all about. And Tony said, you know, how can I make this so, you know, anyone that's in business has an opportunity to go to this. You know, so what he does, it's an application process. What Tony's, like Scott says, it's 95% sold out. It's an application process. You know, go www.tonyrobbins.com/apply now. You get your seat. He's taking small businesses, you know, because he wants a diverse group. He's taking medium-sized businesses and large corporations. You know, companies that are, you know, done well in some area of their business, but they want to turn the other areas around. That's what, you know, that's what Business Mastery is really about.
All right. Well, no problem, Scott. Thanks for filling everybody in. We thank you for spending some time with us today, and until next time, we will talk to you again soon.